Hello and welcome to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and our Aviation Outlook webinar. I'm Alan Stolzer, Dean of the College of Aviation at the Daytona Beach campus. Aviation Outlook features key aviation and aerospace leaders discussing the current state of business and what the future holds for this dynamic and vital industry. In this episode, we're welcoming alumnus and chair of the college's Industry Advisory Board, Andy Nureddin. Andy recently retired from Bombardier as Vice President of Customer Support. Before joining Bombardier, Andy spent 12 years in the airline industry, working as a licensed maintenance engineer and touring the world as part of an aerobatic display team. He was later a flight instructor and chief technical instructor on several aircraft types manufactured by Airbus, Boeing, and Lockheed. He was also responsible for the award-winning Safety Stand-Down, a top safety seminar in civil aviation. Andy grew up around airplanes, soloing at age 16 and constructing his first home-built aircraft, a Benson gyrocopter, at age 19. He earned a Bachelor of Science in Aeronautical Studies and a master's degree in Aeronautical Science, both from Embry-Riddle. In addition, he holds a multi-engine commercial pilot rating and is an FAA licensed airframe and power plant mechanic. Wow. Andy, welcome to Aviation Outlook. I hope you're enjoying some beautiful Canadian weather today.
Well, you know what? We've just had our first cold snap and nothing like density altitude. It really makes those airplanes go. So yes.
Improves the performance, doesn't it?
100%, yes.
Well, as I mentioned, you earned multiple degrees from Embry-Riddle. What role did your experience at Embry-Riddle play in your career?
I would say a very big role. I'd say that in my formative years, the programs that I attended, initially I was in the aircraft maintenance science program, and it gave me a lot of confidence that I later used. Definitely some skills that were key for me, landing my first job, working, today we talk about wood, dope, and fabric as a bit of a dying art, but believe it or not, that was the key to me landing what I would consider a very formative part of my career early on, and allowed me to join that aerobatic team and tour the world using that skill set. The important thing is, I think it was a combination of opening up, the programs that Embry-Riddle has, open up opportunities, and at the same time inculcate the students with the skills and the confidence. I think that a big part of this is the confidence that you get once you've completed the program.
Very good. Well, I'm curious, was there a class or two, or perhaps an instructor who really had a positive effect on you as a student while you were here?
Oh gosh, there are many. Throughout my different degree programs, and of course, I finished my associate degree and my bachelor's degree, then went to work and then came back. I would say a couple of people that have kind of stayed with me and had a lasting impression were a gentleman by the name of Don Gardner. He was the instructor for wood, dope, and fabric, and as I said, that was a key point in my career, or a key skill set that helped launch my career. He had worked for the Smithsonian, and before that, I think he had worked for Goodyear on their blimp. And he taught me some of the more archaic and probably lost art that today I would probably think that there's probably no more than a handful of people that know how to do this kind of work. And he just had this love of workmanship. So you don't just get the job done, you do it to the best that you can. And it was a reflection of who you are, really. Another individual in the air science department was, I believe, Professor Frank Wenzel. He was a professor of meteorology. And before that, I didn't really pay a lot of attention to meteorology other than, yeah, it was a tough course when you're doing your private and then your commercial. But he really allowed me to appreciate not just the applications of meteorology, but in those early days in the 80s, we were just starting to learn about global warming, the effects of climate change, and he was a lead in that. But he also made meteorology alive. I remember, whenever we would have big convective events coming up in the day, he would come in and dramatize what's going to happen. And I would say most of the times he was right. Mm-hmm. But these were people that, I would say generally allowed you to gain a lot more insight than just what the book would tell you or what finishing a course was. They were passionate about what they taught. And I guess the biggest litmus test is they had an everlasting impression on your career, amongst many, many others. I would, if you'd allow me to add one more gentleman who was also a big impact on my career. When I came back from working in the industry for about 7-8 years and decided to go for my graduate work, as you get into the workforce, you develop bad habits, whether it's about reading or scanning things, and of course, getting back into the academic world it was a bit of a shock for me. Here you went from maybe reading a book every month to having to read 2 or 3 a week in the master's program. And Dr. Richardson, I believe, was the gentleman who was chairing the air science program. Kind of eased me into it. There were some tough times as you had to learn how to use word processing, how to kind of recapture some academic rigor. And I think he was one of those individuals that understood that coming back from the workforce into academia needed a bit of a transition, and kind of helped me out with that. So I would definitely say those were the top 3 that come to mind. But again, so many great people that had an influence on my career.
I've heard a number of alums mention Professor Richardson, so I think he must have had a significant impact on a lot of people.
Indeed, indeed.
I remember one of the more enjoyable things I had in my own A&P curriculum was dope and fabric, and you mentioned that. That's an interesting skill set to acquire, isn't it?
It really is. It's artisanal. I would say that if you weren't doing it for the love of the work itself, it would show. Mm-hmm. I think that was the biggest differentiator. And people kind of like the kid today about with dope and fabric, but for the longest of time in aviation history, that was an essential skill set. And today, I think I mentioned to you earlier that I own a Piper Cub. And one of the greatest joys for me is that I know how to build that airplane from the inside out, thanks to those skill sets that existed. And simple in aviation is great. It has worked, withstood the test of time.
And it's really just an early form of composites.
Exactly. Yeah, the composites of 60, 70 years ago.
That's right.
Definitely.
Will you put some of your education and training to use when you built a Benson gyrocopter at age 19? That's pretty impressive. Can you share a bit about that experience?
For sure. Again, I just finished. I would say, my first 2 years of my schooling, and I'd always dreamt of building my own aircraft. The Benson gyrocopter stood out as being very affordable in those days. It was very simple, and it required a minimum of tooling and jigs and so on. And again, it was a question of just having the confidence in applying the skills that I've just acquired through getting, I believe at that time, my airframe ticket, my airframe license. And it was very reinforcing that the skills that you've learned, you've now kind of taken them and applied them into something that is your own creation, so to speak. I ended up flying the airplane as a tow first before we put the engine on. And, its performance was just outstanding. But when you hang an engine on it, it goes from being a mild glider, auto glider, to a Formula One car. And I think I managed to have the good sense of flying it a couple of times before I just started admiring it in the driveway, if you know what I mean. But it was a great experience for me. And I think it again, it gave me the confidence to try different things. And, throughout my career, that was probably one of the formative pieces of skills, which was, being able to construct things, to build something, or, in the case of the aerobatic airplanes that later on in my career, every few years, you had to basically tear down all the fabric and rebuild them. So it was a skill set that kind of stayed with me, everything from project management to materials, and just being able to take on big projects without kind of losing your way.
Yeah, those skill sets translate into other things, don't they?
They sure do. They sure do.
What was the engine on the Benson?
It was a McCulloch, if I remember, a 45 horsepower drone engine, out of all things. Yeah, it was a two-stroke, and when you started that thing, boy, that was loud. But when you look at the power to weight ratio, 45 horsepower, it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you look at the gyrocopter all up, it's probably under 550, 600 pounds. It had quite a kick to it once it opened up. Of course, being a two-stroke engine, it didn't have a very smooth power curve. It was very low power, and then when you turned it on, it really kind of took off. So you had to anticipate this thing and be on top of the collective, as it were.
It had a throttle associated with it, though?
Yes, okay. But the throttle basically kind of took you from 25% power to 100% very quickly.
Yeah, got it. Very good.
A lot of fun.
Well, I've had the pleasure of knowing you for a few years now, and until I was kind of getting ready for this interview, I didn't realize that you had a aerobatics background. So tell us about that. What was that like? What team were you a part of? What airplanes did you fly, et cetera?
Well, I started, as I said, my first role was as a mechanic with the Royal Jordanian Falcons aerobatic team. It was a team that was really spearheaded by the King of Jordan at that time, King Hussein, who wanted to kind of demonstrate that, a country that was not rich in natural resources basically had the human capital and the human resources. So it was it was a team that traveled around the world. I stayed with them for about 4 years. They were flying pit specials, everything from the S2As to the S2Bs to the S2Cs. It was, talk about just living your dream, your aviation dream. It was like barnstorming. We traveled air show to air show. There were about 6 of us, and everything that happens that you read about, whether it's weather, whether it's mechanical, whether it's even personnel conflict. I felt that over the years, I've gone back to that team building moment in my career, and gosh, the friendships that we made. I have one small regret, that I didn't keep a good diary, because it would have made for a heck of a book. We did one tour in North America. In 1982, we covered the continent, coast to coast, did air shows up in Canada as well. And, flying those pit specials around the country was just absolutely stunning. It was, like I said, very, very formative. There are memories that I will never forget. We did air shows in Europe, a couple of seasons, all the big air shows, Farnborough, Paris Air Show. And then we did some air shows in the Far East, which were even more interesting, because the lack of infrastructure and the sheer size or the distances that you'd have to fly in the various types of weather that you would have. So it was very it built character in the sense that you learned how to work with teams, how you remained focused on performance, how you remained focused on outcomes. And I feel that, that was my first professional job, if you will. It helped me a lot later on in my career. Understanding the dynamics of teams, how to work hard, but also enjoy the moment, as it were. And like I said, flying and maintaining these airplanes up close was just a dream come true. Mm-hmm. It'll hopefully one day there's a book that's in me that's coming out that kind of writes about all these experiences and getting forced down by weather or busting into airspace we shouldn't have been in. So a lot of a lot of fun experiences.
Yeah, I would think it would teach you a lot about discipline as well.
100%. When you're at an air show, if you don't have the internal controls and mechanism, we've heard of phenomenon around air shows where the presence of crowds, et cetera, would make pilots kind of take cut corners or cut safety. And you learn very early on that you have to have the discipline to kind of very little room for error. And so discipline was key to surviving the industry.
Were these curious? Were these formation shows or were these solo
formations? Yeah, you used to do 3-ship, sometimes 4-ship formation, and it was basically red color, lots of smoke and lots of noise. So, which is what people liked.
Have you had any desire to get back into pits?
I do from time to time. I've gone up with some friends. Of course, as you get older, the body doesn't recover as well. But it's a great airplane. And I actually had the chance, speaking of great moments in one's career, to meet Curtis Pitts just before he passed. And true to form with people like him and other aviation trailblazers, he was quite a character. He was very easy to talk to. He had some strong opinions, and boy, did he love the Pitts special.
He designed an amazing airplane.
He sure did. He sure did.
Well, Andy, a couple of weeks ago, I attended the National Business Aviation Association convention in Orlando, and saw there's a lot of interest still and continues in business aviation, and that was really the bulk of your career was in that sector. What led you into business aviation?
Well, so I started my career in the airlines, as you mentioned, and in the airlines, you tend to be highly specialized in what you do, whether you're maintaining an airplane, dispatching it, flying it, operating it, servicing it. Generally speaking, as an aviator in the business aviation sector, you tend to have a broader view of the product or the service. So you're not just a pilot, you're not just a mechanic, you're not just a dispatcher and so on and so forth. So you wear multiple hats. And the sheer variety of applications, we use the term business aviation, but it covers everything from specialized missions to ambulance services, medical evacuation, survey work, and of course, the traditional business aviation sector itself, which also covers a broad swath from, institutional flight ops departments for companies to, private individuals, which I must add is probably a small portion of the business aviation industry. So it's such a wide variety of aviation applications. And I think that variety was one of the key attractive sectors for me. And applying your knowledge, when you graduate from Embry-Riddle, you come out with a pretty broad spectrum of expertise and knowledge. whether it's maintenance, flight operations, engineering, or any of the other programs that we have at the university. So it allows you, I think, that broad spectrum of skill set allows you to fit in very nicely, because the business aviation industry is not one skill set. It's not a very narrow specialization. You tend to have to be good at a broad swath of skills, and it's a real fun place to be. The products tend to be on the cutting edge. The aircraft that you operate or fly. In our case, when I joined Bombardier, it has a long history between the Challengers and the Learjets, and later on the Globals, of really pushing the envelope as far as aircraft performance and capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned a broad swath of areas. You spent 14 years as Vice President of Customer Services and Support at Bombardier and oversaw a lot. Training, fleet reliability, warranty, technical support, and others. So that's really a position of enormous responsibility. Reflect on that for us. How did that come about? Give us some of that history and what it was like overseeing that broad swath of activities.
A lot of it, first of all, the business aviation in general is a relationship business, and I as I worked through entering into the business aviation sector, I learned that you get a lot done through the relationships with, whether it be the customers or the suppliers or others. But I also felt that, and this may be a bit of a plug for Embry-Riddle and the skills that I've learned here. It allowed me to have the confidence and the skills and the knowledge to cover everything from highly technical aspects of the airplanes to operational aspects, to customer relationship, something as simple as being able to stand up and speak publicly or resolve conflict, came through the ability to understand the airplanes inside out and the industry inside out. So you approached a problem, I would say, a little bit more creatively, because you understood the underlying technical or operational issues that were there. And again, I owe a lot of that to my degree programs at Embry-Riddle.
You've mentioned confidence a couple times. That's really an important aspect of this, isn't it?
It sure is. It really is, especially, the industry does have high net worth individuals or people that have very little time, and you have to have the confidence to choose a path to resolve a particular issue or address a problem that they have. And you don't have a lot of second chances in doing this. So approaching the problem with confidence and knowledge is key. There are no second chances when you're talking to a very busy captain of the industry or something like that. So
yeah, well, you really did have an amazing career and clearly very well respected industry leader. And I guess I'm curious, so prior to joining Bombardier, can talk about some of the experiences with airlines and with other things that you did that helped prepare you for that activity at Bombardier.
Well, certainly with the airlines, we were, as I entered into the airline side of things, we were phasing out the 3-man crew and getting away from flight engineers, but the flight engineer aspect allowed me to get in and see the airplanes from the inside out. So having built the technical knowledge of aircraft like the 727 and the L-1011 TriStar, allowed me to get into the cockpit as a flight engineer and enhance my expertise and kind of give me a bit of the edge, because you understood the airplanes much better than, say, somebody that just kind of came at it from a strict flight engineer perspective. and having to deal with the changes from a three-person to a two-person cockpit was quite a significant change for us at the time. At the beginning, everybody thought the sky was going to fall, and we're just going to be waylaying these airplanes. And of course, none of that happened. But transitioning through that period and having to deal with a new concept at that time, which was crew resource management, was quite another important milestone in my career. I ended up leading the crew resource management training aspect, both in seminars that we would hold for our flight crew and in line-oriented flight training at the time on the simulators. And I learned a lot from that. I learned about dynamics between people. Remember, having come back from a strong team environment, working with the aerobatic team, it allowed me to have a up close and personal view of the dynamics between crew members and how that would lead to better decision making or poor decision making. Of course, cultures play a big role in that, so we had to kind of inject that into the equation. There's a lot of fun time in learning and applying all these things that we were learning in a very nascent field at that time, which is, now today has moved on and grown. It's become a very essential part of a crew training. But, in the early days, a lot of people were accusing CRM as being charm school for pilots. Today, it's a very essential part of our skill set.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, Andy, let me ask you about automation. You mentioned that and moving from a three-person cockpit to a two-person crew. Look into your crystal ball and tell me whether you see us moving from a two-person crew to a one in passenger carrying operations, whether that's in the airlines or the business aviation sector. I'm sure you have had those conversations at Bombardier. I'd be curious to know where you think that's going.
Boy, that's a hot potato, if ever. I would probably say if there is going to be, we're seeing inroads. First of all, technology has been amazing in increasing the reliability of airplanes. Gosh, when you look at the statistics of the airframe and power plant reliability as a contributor to accidents and incidents, that's kind of been driven down to probably as low as it'll ever get. So airplanes are reliable, systems are reliable, technology is getting better and better and faster in processing. We've also seen single pilot operations and on some aircraft kind of make headway and have real applications. It's beyond just putting it as a marketing in a brochure that this is single pilot certified. These airplanes are now earning their keep that way. So I think that you're going to see a gradual. Aviation doesn't like sudden moves, and thank goodness for that. So I think you're going to continue to see a gradual move towards single pilot operations. A lot of factors that remain kind of indeterminate is whether or not that movement is going to break through into the commercial aviation sector in the sense of airline types. And I say variables that are difficult to predict because there is the concept of public opinion and public sentiment. And today, you've kind of taken it as far as you possibly could with a two-person crew. People kind of understand you got the pilot, you got the co-pilot. But if you go down to one person or possibly eliminate the human in the loop completely, human beings are great problem solvers when everything else kind of goes away. So I don't know that we will ever get to that point where in an air carrier operation, you'll completely eliminate the human being. I could see us making gradual moves towards a single pilot operation as technology kind of gives us that protection. I would also say that I began to say, it's very difficult for us to predict certain variables. One of those variables that is coming upon us now in great effect is urban air mobility. And as you have seen, the advancements that the technology has brought in terms of redundancy, reliability, application of urban air mobility could be one of those variables that radically changes the game in the future as far as adoption of either single pilot operations or pilotless aircraft. But time will tell.
Really good comments. You know, you mentioned public perception and customer acceptance being key ingredients in whether we can move toward a reduced person cockpit. Would you agree that that might be more acceptable in the business aviation world, at least initially, than in commercial aircraft, just because, you know, quite frankly, in some areas of business aviation, we only have one pilot as it is now. The aircraft doesn't require two. So might it be that the customers are more readily accepting of a single person cockpit in business aviation, at least initially?
I would agree 100% with that statement, Dr. Stolzer. As a matter of fact, you know, today there exist operations that do have single pilot aircraft or being flown and operated by single pilots. Again, because of the broad swath of applications in business aviation, what we term business aviation, you would probably see that as being the spearhead, and it's probably the area to watch to see how the public, the end customers in business aviation accepts this change. So far, the indications are very positive, both from a technology aspect and, you know, the aircraft that are being built, the airspace and the airspace management tools that we have, the automation in the cockpit lend themselves very readily to single pilot operations. It's, you know, the big question is going to be, does that continue? Does that get accelerated by things like urban air mobility, as I mentioned? And what happens when you get into hitting that glass ceiling, which is the air carrier operations, where, you know, public scrutiny would probably be a little bit more a bigger variable than it is in business aviation.
Do you think the regulators are getting ready for this transition?
Oh boy, like I said, aviation is a very gradual business, and thank goodness for that. You know, there are reasons why regulators kind of have a balancing act between advancement, of course, of the industry, while also what appears to be the public good in you know, and safety. At some point, they're going to have to come to terms with what the technology is bringing. And I would say one place to watch, as we said, is urban air mobility. Will we be able to kind of absorb urban air mobility into the national airspace system? Will we be able to standardize the different applications, the different aircraft that are coming up in the market? The regulators have a huge role to play in that. And I think they're just starting to kind of get warmed up for this. Not a moment too soon, because technology is just galloping in that direction.
Absolutely. Well, I think we all know what impact COVID had on air carrier, airline activity. Talk about what it had in business aviation and how that has how business aviation has rebounded since COVID.
A very good question. I feel that, you know, so let me wind the clock back a little bit to the financial meltdown, as it were, in 2008 and subsequent. That was really hard on aviation, in business aviation in particular. You know, I remember in the early days of 2008, you know, everybody was coming up with their forecasts on the hundreds of airplanes that are going to get built and sold, and you know, the sky was the limit. And when the financial crisis hit, it just ravaged the industry. And you know, a lot of companies today are not there as a result of that, both, you know, airframers and service providers and operators. So I'd say from the 2008 point onwards, business aviation was sort of in that space where it wasn't really recovering. It was a bit flatlined, I would say. You know, there were exceptions where there were bright spots, the odd year here and there. But I believe that with COVID and the pandemic and the shutdowns, it had had a probably an oversized effect on business aviation, a positive effect on business aviation, in the sense that people have rediscovered the value of business aviation. And you know, for reasons that we won't get into here, the reapplication of business aviation as a tool of choice for travel moved away from, you know, this is a tool for the rich and the high net worth individuals, into, you know, this could be affordable. This could be a viable solution for a certain segment of the traveling public, and you don't have to have lots of money. You don't have to be a celebrity to be able to afford it. This is being evidenced by the increase of importance of management companies and the increase of the availability of jet cards, or, you know, fractional ownership of airplanes. All the fractional operators, whether it's FlexJet, NetJets, VistaJet, around the world, the big guys are basically telling you that they just can't find enough airframes to get people onto their fractional ownership. So it's occupying a new niche, and that has changed. So you're finding that there's probably less single ownership. You know, there'll always be the people that are able to own their own airplane, but you're finding that a lot more people are running towards fractional ownership as a solution. And when you compare that in terms of combining the total value proposition of availability of the aircraft, ease of travel, dealing with things like border controls and, you know, some of the restrictions that we saw during the pandemic, that in its totality, it probably equates to commercial air travel. And so you're seeing that segment expand tremendously as a result, I would say, of it being rediscovered post-pandemic.
Mm-hmm. You know, as the chair of our industry advisory board, you're well aware of our enrollment kind of history and where we're going, and enrollment in interest in our programs at Embry-Riddle has really never been higher. And we find a lot of the interest is in the airline sector, quite frankly. But there are so many opportunities in the business aviation sector. Why should students consider business aviation? And how do we, as university administrators, make these opportunities more visible and apparent to students?
It's a very good question, because, you know, honestly, having seen both sides of the equation, you know, the air carrier operations as well as business aviation, I'd say that it's infinitely more rewarding for the simple reason that you have that breadth of application. You do more. You can see your product. You know, your passengers are not as anonymous as, you know, in air carrier operations. Don't get me wrong, air carrier operations have an important role to play, but business aviation is very rewarding in and of itself, because you could see the end-to-end operation most of the time. I would say it's probably incumbent on the industry itself, on business aviation, to stand up and be heard, to be a little bit more engaged with the students and with universities such as Embry-Riddle and others in kind of bringing or highlighting to the students and new entrants into the business that there's another segment or sector that you really should give a second look at, because it can be equally rewarding. And I would say, our earlier comment about the growth of business aviation post-pandemic, it is creating a lot of opportunities that people just don't know exist.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say the industry has a big role to play in engaging with universities. I would say that the universities probably, aside from kind of facilitating and making room for the industry to speak out and let the students know what it's about, can also continue to dynamically enhance the content of the curricula to reflect that part of it. And I think generally, because it tends to have the industry requires people with broad spectrum of skills, it lends itself nicely to university programs where, if you're learning how to fly, you're learning the totality of flight operations. So I think just kind of for the industry to remain engaged with educational institutions, being heard, contributing. There's a ton of opportunity in giving back to the universities. I think that is something that is very near and dear to my heart. Would kind of raise the profile of the industry in general.
Appreciate that. We're trying to do more and more here at the university in terms of exposing students to these opportunities in business aviation and other sectors, but business aviation in particular. And we do that through our curricula, through inviting key industry leaders such as yourself to engage with students through these kinds of programming and other things. So really good thoughts. I appreciate that. Andy, in my own career, mentors played a big role. I assume you had some mentors. Talk about that a little bit. Who were those and what impact they had on you?
Oh, 100%. I think when you look back at your career, everything from your first impressions to that career assist, as I would call it, whether it is a true actual assist itself or just a mental assist in overcoming difficulties or obstacles in as you grow your career are an important part of this. And I'm no exception. I think that I probably had some people that were very important in forming my view of aviation and forming my view of leadership in general. Starting with aviation, I think the gentleman who used to lead the team at that time, we used to call him Chief, was a salty old ex-US Air Force crew chief. And he was a great pilot, but he was also a great mechanic, and didn't suffer fools gladly. You always knew where you stood. But he was a great mentor in the sense that if he saw that you're working hard, he gave you the opportunities to fulfill, and he never kind of held you back. So that was probably one of the, I'll call it a little bit the more technical mentorship that I had. I think the more subtle mentorship that I got over the years was from people that I emulated in leadership, and that's so important because I think mentors can be sort of like the glasses that you see the world through, and if your mentors or the people that you look up to have certain less than positive traits, I think that would reflect on you ultimately, because you're probably going to adopt some of these less than positive traits. The flip side of this, of course, is if you're fortunate enough to have mentors or people that you look up to that have incredibly positive outlooks, that know how to wield power positively to contribute to a great working environment, as well as, a results-based environment. I think those are individuals that, I look back on my career and I can think of a handful of individuals that helped me understand what leadership is all about. And, having just retired after 25 years with Bombardier and just over 40 years in the industry, I had the chance over the summer to kind of hear back about my leadership style. And a lot of it was, unbeknownst to me, or maybe it was something that I worked at, was leadership matters. And my hope is that when I left the industry and when I retired, through demonstrating those types of leadership traits, probably helped a few other people and kind of infected them with the right kind of leadership traits that I got infected with in the past. And a lot of it is to do with, they're not just buzzwords, but servant leadership, working for people, making sure that they succeed, recognizing people, and understanding where you fit in an organization, because the higher you go up, the more important it is that you're aware of your leadership style. And I would say that, as I said, a handful of individuals kind of helped open my eyes to the importance of leadership in organizations.
Great. It sounds like a book on leadership might be in the offing. Huh?
After the book on aerobatics, I think.
There you go. Well, you and I also share a passion for aviation safety. And when you were at Bombardier, you planned what is considered to be one of the top safety seminars in aviation, called the Safety Stand Down. Talk about how you got involved in that, what motivated you to do it, what your experience was with that.
Well, so Safety Stand Down was definitely something that was there before I came along, and it started, as the name implies, as a stand down of the flight demo team at Learjet in Wichita. I would say about 27, 28 years ago. And gradually it started to bring in some customers to join the flight demo team in their stand down. And then we kind of, as a company, started saying, well, hey, this is a pretty good thing. Remember my comment about business aviation being a relationship-based industry. It cemented those relationships between Bombardier, Learjet, Canadair, and our customer base. And it was growing very nicely. I think that, when the financial crisis hit in 2008, and just about that time is when I started to get involved with Safety Stand Down, we had to face the facts, like everybody else, that this was an important program, but we needed to ensure that it continued forward. And a lot of it was really kind of having the right sponsorship within the company, enumerating the benefits to the industry and to our customer base, to our senior executives, so that, frankly, it doesn't get axed. And I felt that a combination of the relationships that we were building and the true good that we were giving back to the industry through the Safety Stand Down were essential for us to continue this effort. We still have an advisory council of Safety Stand Down, and you couldn't find a more passionate bunch of people that were there for the program. And I think harnessing that, these are leaders in the industry, and when we turned to them, we said, look, continuity of the program as it stands today is essential for all of us. Let's all band together and find ways of, sponsorship, increased content, opening up the doors, increasing the throughput of people that would come and attend. I felt that everybody kind of rose to the challenge over the years. Mm-hmm. It remains an open, free of charge safety seminar. It remains one that is sponsored by people like the MBAA. The NTSB is a great sponsor. Their presence there just kind of lends it, together with the FAA, a sense of importance that we're truly appreciative of. And the speakers, my gosh, the lineup of individuals are truly second to none in terms of their knowledge and thought leadership in the industry. So it was important for us to kind of keep it. I'd say the basic fundamentals were free access. We encourage students to attend. We encourage universities and flight schools to bring their students, kind of sponsor their travel and living, because access to it remains free. And more importantly, we're agnostic on product. So you'll never see us kind of push a Bombardier product or not include pilots from Textron, Gulfstream. It's very agnostic in terms of the product itself. And we encourage people from the airlines to attend, the military. So it really is about safety, full stop.
Mm-hmm. How large has it grown?
Oh my gosh. I mean, today, I think our largest, it's only as big as the venue. And we did a couple of events before pandemic that tipped the scales at 600 plus. Of course, now with virtual attendance, that's kind of changed it a bit. We still kind of manage about 450 to 500 people in person. But this year, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have our first post-pandemic, and we'll see the numbers, because we're setting up a little bit more professionally for virtual attendance. And I guarantee you that it's going to top the 1,000 easily.
Wow, that's very impressive. You're mostly retired now, as we've mentioned, and you're a pilot and proud owner of a Piper Cub.
Yes, sir.
You get out and fly that pretty frequently. It's a beautiful airplane, isn't it?
It really is. It's and I feel again, it's a beautifully restored 1941 Piper Cub, so it's 81 years old today. And I feel that it's not ownership; it's a trusteeship of that airplane. It's low and slow. Of course, up here in Canada, you have to have some very strong constitution to be able to fly it between the months of November and April. But aside from that, it's an absolute joy to fly. I still get a charge out of, you get these people that come up with, fancy photographic, equipment that come out and kind of wait at the end of the runway. And I've seen some pictures of this airplane up there. Truly, it's a beautiful airplane. I think that all airplanes should be yellow and should look like a Piper Cub.
I am fortunate enough to have some time in one and love flying it with the doors open. But
Absolutely.
maybe not in Canada during the winter.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's like I said, it's a trusteeship, because I feel that I want to pass this on. When my flying days are over, to somebody else, and my hope is that it will see the 100th birthday still flying in airworthy condition.
I'm sure it will. I want to mention something that's made an impact on me, Andy, is your commitment to Embry-Riddle. It's very strong. That's so apparent. You attended this university, and you recently accepted my invitation to chair the College of Aviation's Industry Advisory Board. So you continue to give back to the university. Why is that important to you? Can you talk about that?
For sure. I think one of the things that happened in my career that I'm forever indebted to the university with is, as I was working through my bachelor's degree, I was awarded a fellowship of the College of Aviation. And, the program at that time, basically you worked a few hours a week in return for a significant reduction in your tuition costs, which was very important. I benefited from that fellowship in two ways. One, just the sheer development. It was my first real job in aviation, if you will, working with students, learning the material that I was helping teach. I was a lab assistant in a few AMS, aircraft maintenance science workshops, and cement your knowledge and expertise in that in those different workshops or shops. And more importantly, it defrayed some of the costs of my tuition. When I look back, that was so important on so many levels. First, it gave me that trajectory to continue to work hard and finish my degree. And the actual immersion in the university and in the teaching of students, it gave me one of those career boosts that you talk of, that we've talked about earlier. So, when you look back, these are small things in one's career that have had an oversized impact. And I would love to, throughout my knowledge and expertise that I've gathered over 42 years in the industry, to, even if I change or positively impact one student, I would consider that a win. Of course, being able to share some of that expertise, some of that those connections in the industry, and some of that knowledge with the university to better the programs, the status of the students, assist in their careers, would be something that is very meaningful for me. So giving back in its truest form is what this is all about for me.
Great. Well, I can assure you, you're having that positive impact on our students.
I appreciate it.
Any final thoughts for our guests or advice for our students before we let you go?
Well, I think first and foremost, I would say for our students, and I may be a little bit biased here in my opinion, being at Embry-Riddle affords you as a student your biggest career break ever. I think, being an Embry-Riddle graduate will prepare you for an exciting industry, one that I don't think has any equal. I did say I'm biased. And one of the most exciting career choices that you have. So get all that you can out of it, because once you get out into the world, you're going to use just about every ounce of knowledge and expertise and skill that you've gathered here. And there's a lot to gain. I feel that what you get out of your experience as a student at Embry-Riddle will get magnified with time and will bear fruit for many years to come. So absorb all that you can, learn all that you can, and you'll be very well prepared for the world of aviation. I think for our guests and sponsors and alumni, I would say, their contributions, their engagement are probably second to none that I've seen in the industry. There's a certain passion to being an Embry-Riddle alumnus. And I just encourage all these folks to continue to engage, because they're doing great work and it's reflecting on the quality of the education at the university.
Excellent. Well, thank you. This has really been a delightful conversation. I know I've benefited from it, and I think all of our guests and students will, and we really thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stolzer. It's my honor to be there, and great to see you again.
Thank you.
Take care.
To our guests, these ongoing Aviation Outlook webinars have featured leaders such as the chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board, FAA administrator, executives from aircraft manufacturers and airlines, astronauts, our own university president, and so many other accomplished and inspiring guests. You can find all of these by searching on YouTube for Embry-Riddle Aviation Outlook. From Embry-Riddle's College of Aviation, see you next time on Aviation Outlook.